Think if you are a man watching this, your existence is a statistical anomaly that required the death of 19 other men to secure. This is not metaphor. This is genetic archaeology. 7,000 years ago, something happened to the human species. Not a plague. Not a predator. Not an asteroid. Something quieter. Something deliberate. The evidence hides in your cells. In the coiled architecture of your DNA, there is a record. A ledger of inheritance stretching back 200,000 years. And that ledger shows a deletion event so severe, so targeted, that it defies natural explanation. 95% of male genetic diversity. Erased. In a span of roughly 2,000 years, the Y-chromosome, that single strand that makes a man, experienced a collapse. A bottleneck so narrow that only a fraction of male lineages pass through. Mitochondrial DNA, the maternal line, remained stable. Untouched. The X chromosome continued its steady inheritance from mother to daughter. But the Y? The Y was pruned. For every one man who passed on his genes during this period, 17 women were reproducing. That ratio is not natural. It is not the signature of famine or disease. It is the signature of organized elimination. We assume our ancestors died from nature. From cold. From hunger. From the teeth of predators. The genetic record tells a different story. The most efficient killer of ancient men was other men. And the question that remains unanswered, the question that has haunted geneticists since this pattern was first identified, is this: how did a species obsessed with survival voluntarily execute a genetic call more efficient than the Black Death, and why did it only target the Y chromosome? The numbers alone do not capture the horror. The darkest part of this story is not how many died. It is how they were processed. The male genome was not merely damaged. It was reformatted, corrupted hard drive sectors wiped clean and overwritten by a handful of dominant operating systems. 95% of the data deleted. The surviving 5% copied and distributed across all future generations. This is the Neolithic Y-Chromosome Bottleneck. A genetic hourglass where millions of male lineages compressed into a narrow passage. Most did not survive the transit. The pattern is unmistakable. Between 7,000 and 5,000 years ago, something shifted in human social structure. The shift corresponds precisely with the rise of patrilineal kinship, social systems where lineage traces through the father. Where inheritance flows from man to son. Where land, cattle, and women become currencies of power. And currencies must be hoarded. To achieve a 17-to-1 reproductive ratio, you do not need natural selection. You need logistics. Infrastructure. Systems capable of processing human bodies at scale. In what is now southwestern Germany, there is a site called Herxheim. A Neolithic settlement. A village of fewer than 50 people. The archaeology shows they processed over 1,000 human bodies. Pause on that arithmetic. 50 people. 1,000 corpses. This is not a battle. This is not a massacre. This is industrial throughput, a small village operating as a processing plant for an entire region's dead. The bones tell the story. They bear specific marks, the signature of defleshing with stone scrapers. Skull split along the midline to access the brain. Long bones cracked open while still fresh, what archaeologists call green bone fracture, to extract the marrow like or from a vein. The acoustic signature of green bone snapping is different from dry bone. Wetter. Sharper. A crunch that speaks of extraction, not mourning. Chemical analysis shows some victims traveled over 300 miles to reach Herxheim. They did not come willingly. They were brought. But the most disturbing detail is trophic. Nutritional. Analysis of the remains shows preferential bite marks on hand phalanges. Fingers. Evidence of systematic tongue removal. This was not war. This was consumption. Humans became a food source. A caloric resource to be harvested, processed, and distributed. If we scale this pattern to modern population levels, the Neolithic bottleneck would be equivalent to 3.9 billion men erased from the genetic record, a number so vast it becomes abstract, so horrific it slides off the mind like water off bone. The Y chromosome did not decline by accident. It was hunted. And the hunters had a system. The answer lies in the architecture of kinship. When lineage traces through fathers, patrilineal kinship, the brotherhood of the sword, your male relatives transform. They are no longer allies. They are competitors. Every cousin, every uncle, every brother represents a rival claim to land, to cattle, to reproductive access. Clans did not kill enemy men. They erased their genetic futures. This is lineal fission, the silent pruning. The process by which weaker male bloodlines are excluded from resources, starved of reproductive access, or buried in mass graves like Talheim and Schlitz. At Schlitz, archaeologists discovered something troubling in the victim demographics. Preteens and young teenagers were missing from the dead. Not killed with the others. Not among the corpses. They were absorbed. Taken. Integrated into the victorious clan. If your Y chromosome survived the bottleneck, there is a statistical probability that it traces back to kidnapped stock. Children pulled from the ashes of their families and raised to carry the conqueror's line. To understand why humanity built this filter, you must understand where they built it. Inside the first walls. For 200,000 years, humans lived without horizons interrupted. The sky stretched infinite in every direction. Movement was survival. Stagnation was death. Then, roughly 7,000 years ago, something unprecedented occurred. Humans began to wall themselves in. The first fortified settlements were not protection. They were containment. Imagine it. You have evolved on open savanna. Your ancestors survived by reading distance, predators on the horizon, herds migrating across plains, weather systems approaching from far away. Your neurology is calibrated for space. Now the sky shrinks. Wooden palisades rise around you, blocking your sightlines. For the first time in evolutionary history, you cannot see what is coming. The acoustic environment shifts with the architecture. Sounds that should dissipate across open ground are now trapped within wooden chambers, amplified, echoing back upon themselves until the wet snap of green bone and the rhythmic scrape of stone against flesh become the ambient soundtrack of settlement life. These were people with lifespans of 20 to 33 years. Modern humans live 3 times longer. They live 3 times harder. Compressed. Concentrated. Locked behind walls with their competitors and their cattle and nowhere to run. This is the environment that produced the filter. Not the open wilderness. Not the hunting grounds of the Paleolithic. The Y chromosome bottleneck was forged inside palisades. In settlements where every male was a potential rival, and resources were finite. The failed relatives, the 95%, did not die in epic battles. Many died in cramped villages. Killed by neighbors. Processed by kin. For 7,000 years, we have assumed we are descendants of the survivors. The victims of this war. The ones who endured. The genetic evidence suggests something far more uncomfortable. What if we are not the descendants of the victims? We carry the winner's Y chromosome. The lineage that passed through the bottleneck was not the lineage of the peaceful. It was not the lineage of the cooperative. It was the lineage of the men who dominated, killed, and erased their competitors with such efficiency that 95% of male diversity simply stopped. We assume civilization brought peace. We assume agriculture brought cooperation. We assume walls brought safety. The genetic record proves otherwise. Civilization brought organized, systematic extermination first. Peace came later. Much later. After the pruning was complete. After the Y chromosome had been filtered down to the lineages willing to do what was necessary. Return now to the number that opened this story. 17 to 1. In the beginning, that ratio was a statistic of death. A measurement of horror. The scale of the purge. But from here, from the end, that ratio carries different weight. It is not a tragedy we witnessed. It is a filter we passed through. We are the sons of the one, not the 17. Our Y chromosome is not a random inheritance. It is a trophy passed down from men who were willing to kill, to dominate, to erase competitors for 2,000 years until the filter closed and the bottleneck ended. Every man watching this carries that signature. The genetic marker of the victors. The legacy of the monsters. And so the question that remains is not historical. It is not about ancient bones or forgotten massacres. It is about you. If 95% of male gentleness was bred out of the species 7,000 years ago, are we the survivors? Or are we the scarring left over from the wound?